Welcome everyone. It's great to see so many people here today. My name is Amber Huff. I'm a research fellow here at IDS and coordinator of the Center for Future Natures. And on behalf of Future Natures and the Politics of Nature Reading Group and the Resource Politics Research Cluster at IDS, I'd like to really welcome you all and our speaker today, Professor Tobias, who is, as the website says, an extraordinary professor of social anthropology, but he explains this is just a typo. Or a translation error.
A strange translation from German. You know, we have assistant professor, außerordentliche Professor, which translates in this strange extraordinary, and then ordentliche Professor, which is the highest level. So I'm not extraordinary, but just below the ordinary.
But I still think it's great. Based at the Institute of Social Anthropology at the University of Bern in Switzerland. Former president of the International Association for the Study of the Commons, right?
No, I was.
Sorry.
No problem. No, I'm actually co-leading the European section of the International Association for the Study of the Commons.
Okay, but you weren't the president.
I was never president.
Okay, never mind.
No
I'm
problem.
sorry. Tobias specializes in economic and ecological anthropology with a focus on common pool resource management, new institutionalism, local perceptions of environment, peasants and agropastoralists, fishermen, oil exploitation, protected areas, community-based natural resource management, and many, many more things. He's joined us today to talk about his new book, Disenchanted, Modernities, Mega Infrastructure Projects and the Drama of the Grabbed Commons, which is a result of a collaboration among researchers at the Institute of Social Anthropology at the University of Bern, but also at the Center of Development and Environment and Wageningen and Oxford Universities. So I will hand it over to you.
Thank you very much for the invitation and for the kind introduction. Just what I would like to do, presenting this book, I will show first a bit the idea, the rationale behind it, also some theoretical aspects. I hope I don't lose you during theory, because it's relevant when I then also present 4 case studies out of the 16 which we have collected here, and then come to a conclusion and also to a case regarding mega infrastructure in Switzerland that had a very interesting, nice turn that can be perhaps discussed if something can be taken for the analysis in the global south and more. Perhaps first, this book is the last book, I think, of a trilogy which we have. We did at the University of Zurich, where I did all my studies, a first book together with students doing their master's thesis on fossil energy exploitation, which is actually leading at the beginning of the pipeline to destructions, but also to local reactions against this destruction. So it was about oil and gas companies all over the world. A second book we did in the same style on mining, which is called The Open Cut, edited by Thomas Niederberger and myself and others, where we did the same thing, actually including master students and their work into then a comparative publication in order to see that we just don't have just one case, which often happens in anthropology. You have this case, but there's not much sort of comparison. And this is now Disenchanted Modernities. We got a step further regarding mega infrastructure projects, which also include sometimes oil and mining, but which is really about large infrastructure. And you see here 2 pictures of the title of the book. I will show it then around. The picture up there is a big port in Kenya, Port Lamu. Below is a European case in Norway, the Fosen windmill area and project. And here this is a picture of people, indigenous people, defending actually the South Dakota, trying to defend the area against the building of the South Dakota pipeline, so the Standing Rock topic. So we have 16 cases which we have a look at of mega infrastructure projects all over the globe, in Africa, Latin America, Asia, and also then Africa. Very quickly, what do we understand under MIPs, as the abbreviation is? So there's an increased issue of connectivity, not just digital, but also material all around the world since the last 10 to 15 years, a wide range of roads, rails, pipelines, and ports, etc. You see here in the back also green energy, which is produced. This is a picture from Morocco, the largest solar project. This aims to provide access to and transportation of goods, raw materials, crisscrossing large areas. So it's really trying to bring actually more grease into capitalism, in the sense not only digital, but also being able to mobilize goods and services. Very important. And of which you know is this Belt and Road initiative, where China is really behind it. And also it's now docking into green economy and climate change mitigation policies. The trend of producing green energies, legitimizing also these large projects as not making more money, but making the planet greener in the sense of extension of sustainable production. That was happening with biofuel production, which has been criticized, but solar and wind parks are actually something which people not see as problematic in the discourse. In the global north, also railway extension, dams, etc. If I say people in the global north, I talk about decision makers, because if you go up to Scotland, I don't know who of you has been there lately, it has all these signs, no to wind turbines, etc. If you go there, you will see this. So there's actually something not about north and south, it's something which we would like to show, which is happening everywhere, and it's about who is governing and who is deciding and who has to bear the costs of these infrastructures. Furthermore, the whole thing is also geostrategic sort of issues, their motivations behind it. So if the Chinese are doing, we also need to do, etc. We all know this, in order to legitimate this and accelerate the planning of the mega infrastructure projects. What is important, not all of them are realized. But already the idea that they are realized might increase local value, contexts, etc. So it's also a sort of imagination, and from an anthropological point of view, this imagination is very, very important. The impacts, it's, as I said, legitimated by implementing states and the private sector as bringing development. So this enchantment discourse of modernity, this brings, it's not just about money, no. We bring development to your area, which has not been developed. You will profit sort of from all this. This is the basic discourse. But it hides many losers in this process, so local resource users often cannot profit, cannot use this infrastructure because it's not for them. But at the same time, they see their land, and very important, land-related common pool resources. Often this is not discussed. It's not just about the land, it's what's on the land, below the land, and above the land, which is very important for local people, because that's the only thing which they have very often. Although they think, oh, modernity will come and we'll get a job, etc., but often this is not taking place. So the only thing which still remains is access to water, to fisheries, to land, to pastoral areas, etc. I think this is very important, because in a lot of discussions, this falls completely under the table. That it's also these resources. So the term land grabbing, this is a bit me being polemical, because I come from the commons scholar side. I would really have it to be replaced by commons grabbing, because it's land and land related common pool resources which are at stake. As I said, all these areas often, not always, but often governed by local common property regimes, later on transformed by the states during colonial and post-colonial times, specifically in the global south, actually as state property, or privatized during post-colonial periods. So the increase of the MIPs leads, that's the argument which we have, and we show in this book, to an increased commons grabbing processes which are going far beyond the usual land grab debate, because these projects are bigger. And hence also what we are arguing is that immediately there's a disenchantment of local people, that they realize immediately this is not for us. Yes?
By local common property regimes, you mean when there are kings and monarchs?
I mean mainly, I did a lot of work in Africa, but also in Switzerland. If you look historically, many, for instance, in Africa, in many areas where I've been working, we had comparative projects, for instance, in African floodplain areas. Before colonial times, there were a group who had perhaps leaders, but mainly this idea we belong to a territory, all these resources, fish, wildlife, pasture, forestry, etc., is actually something which we share. There are rules and regulations on how to manage this. So when is the time when to go to the pasture, when collective fishing has been taking place, etc. And we'll talk about this in a minute. Also, this idea that people had a vision that this territory is not just for them, but all the living beings in this territory are also connected to these commons. So the term commons can also be enlarged there. We'll talk in a minute about this. But this disenchantment is there. And now the idea in social anthropology to have several case studies is also, of course, contested, because can you control the parameters, in order to compare? Despite that critique, we tried actually, we had a seminar with students and a writing seminar together with that main seminar, where students who were interested could select an area where they would like to work, where they would like to do research. At the same time, there were a couple of master's students who really did research in these areas. I will talk later on about this. So when we started, we were looking at theoretical context. How do we work? And there's this new frontier issue, which is of course interesting, because this mega infrastructure extends sort of the frontier of previous capitalist interests and trying to get resources from all over the globe. But we also realized that there's a bit of problem with this new frontier debate, as to me, it doesn't look sufficiently, I must frame, sufficiently at pre-existing extensions of the so-called frontier. I mean, it's okay if you talk about the new frontier in the US during colonial times or in other areas, but many things have happened of changes, of institutional changes. So we thought it's falling on already colonially shaped structures or historically shaped structures, which need to be much more discussed. Then it's done with the theory, specifically by Christian Lund and colleagues. We are in debate and discussions with them, but there's something where we thought we need to go a bit beyond. What we thought of in the process, what is quite interesting for the analysis is James Ferguson's anti-politics machines. I don't know if you, or anti-politics machine, I don't know if you are familiar with that term. It's the idea of Ferguson that this notion of development, he had a look at South Africa, at Lesotho and Transkei, that actually this hides the power asymmetries behind of exploitation, etc., and technocratic control. It hides actually these power asymmetries behind the promise of development. So that actually it's like a smoke screen hiding to show that powerful actors are profiting from that development and not the large rest. To put it really in a simple nutshell, there's much more about it. But I think we thought this is exactly what is happening. And it's a sort of also legitimacy enables access to land and resources for powerful users. And there has been a debate, is it also desiring machines? Is it also like a machine which does not create the smoke screen regarding development and power things, but also creates desires, that people sort of are enchanted with, oh, this big road will come. And if the road will come, people will come in and there will be business and jobs, etc. So this desire regarding this modern type of development, which is there. And there the idea of enchantment and disenchantment regarding, that's a harsh word, false promises, but this is actually a local perception which we have seen in many cases. So there's a lot of theoretical work around Ferguson's work related to this enchantment and disenchantment, which we thought is quite interesting. And now as a third point, and this is now a bit stretching, and I hope I don't overuse it, is this idea to have a look at new institutionalism and combine it in anthropology. I will say in a minute what this means, and combine it with political ecology, power analysis. What does that mean? From a new institutional perspective, it's looking at how land and land-related pool resources previously held in common property face, before these changes, already a change in value. So it's no longer valued as being a resource for, for pasture or for wildlife and for fisheries, but for something else, which is very important for external users. And then this is not just the new instant frontier happening, but falling on local pre-colonial rules and regulations which were there before, and then the changed colonial, post-colonial power and institutional constellations, meaning suddenly there are rules and regulations just about land, but then there are rules and regulations about conservation, there are rules and regulations about water, there are rules and regulations about fisheries. So the whole thing gets sort of fragmentized, and it creates a plurality of institutional settings which local people cannot control. And that's important, that new institutionalism sort of analyzes how external pressures and the powerful actors who have the power to change the value of such resources, and then the rules and regulations which change before the expansion process. I will show you a model that explains this a bit more. But what we take from political ecology is what is a bit missing here. You will see there's the notion of bargaining power, which is important, but other power analysis is missing. So the power struggle, which we have realized when engaging with local people, their view of the environment and their feeling as an individual in the environment is connected very much to what Descola calls animist or totemist sort of power, seeing themselves as being connected with spiritual beings and other beings. And that hits itself regarding the Western naturalist power, who makes this division between nature and culture. Whereas for the other ontologies, it's we are embedded, this is a cultural landscape. The power is now with external users who say, well, in this area far away, you will see it with Norway. There's some reindeer herders there using nature. So this can be used for windmills. This doesn't harm. This doesn't create a problem. And the power to have this naturalist ontology to divide nature and culture is a very important thing. And that's something which has came very lately in political ecology. We might discuss this also later on. But it's also added with structural power. I mean, who has the cash? Who has the money to invest in these new technologies? And also the discursive post-structuralist powered legitimacy of this modern development and the enchantment. Very quickly, this model which we are using, and it's not a theory as such, it's just actually a model to check, do we understand everything when we analyze something? You have external elements, environmental, social, physical, also what we call the market here, then population dynamics, increase, decrease, and then technology, new technology used, which shapes actually the value of a resource or also of a territory, and gets into a so-called action arena where local people have different bargaining power. So for instance, local people have less bargaining power because powerful people will select the institution not of common property but of state property and say it's a state land, so investors can come and do it. Use then the ideology or the discourse and narrative of development, so to speak, which boosts the selection of state property land to be used, and organizational forms to give power to external organizations actually to do the job. Then there will be no jobs, so there will be distributional effects, social political behavior, and then you have these feedback loops. I hope this was more or less clear. You can look at the presentation perhaps later on. And what we did now, we said, okay, power, we have to beef this up, because in this model from Ensminger, which is a social anthropologist from the US, it's quite good insofar as at least we have bargaining power here. But there's a lot of lack for other power dynamics which are going on. There's this discursive power. Why is it good to have a value of an area for windmills, etc.? Structural power, who has the money to come in? Ontological power, well, to say, well, this is pure nature with no population, so we can increase the relative price of this area for windmills or for solar panels, etc. And then, inside this action arena, which is a term from Elinor Ostrom, by the way, it affects how powerful people are. And here the ontological power is also, what is it that we have? And there's a contestation between this sort of animistic or totemistic power, the relation people have with the land, etc., versus this naturalist power. And it's not clear who wins. So this is like a drama. We have to see what's happening in here when we analyze, and then how this affects the distributional effects with capital behavior. And here I put ontological power, as you will see in the case studies. Many of local people resist, not just because of lack of money, etc., but because they see themselves embedded in this landscape in a very, very different way, and they're not enchanted by what comes on. And then hence the whole power struggle unfolds. And then you have different feedback loops. Here one should have one more direct, one more here. I will not sort of bore you then to show this model towards the end. I have it in the presentation, but you can have a look at it, how we were working. Are there questions up to now, or can you follow me up to now? Yes?
I'm struggling to follow the NIP.
Mm-hmm.
If you could summarize it a little bit simply, what the NIP is about.
Okay.
And also what an ontological power means.
Yes, okay. So NIPE means the combination of new institutionalism, having this idea that external factors change the value of a region, and then you have a debate inside who can legitimate what to do, what rules and regulations are selected regarding property rights and other aspects, how it's organized, and then the distributional effects. Political ecology means that in political ecology you have a very good analysis of power dynamics. And there are, according to me and also hopefully to others, 3 power dynamics: capital power, I mean, who has the cash, who has the money, you know, classic Marxist perspective. Then the second one would be discursive power related to Foucault, who controls the discourse, what is right and what is wrong, what is development, what is modernity, for instance, you know. And that is also a power which is there and which is used. And then the last thing, from a more feminist and indigenous perspective, saying, well, these 2 power analyses are not enough. There's another issue of power, which is ontology is the science of the being, of the perceiving the whole environment, of the worldview as such. And there's a division between what local people all around the globe have, specifically in the global south, that they see themselves as being part of a larger environment with also spirits and other animals, etc. And also seeing the environment as not being nature or pure nature, but being something where they have been living with, which is a cultural landscape, versus a more Western view, which divides nature and culture in the ontology, saying, as I said, which you will see in one of the cases, well, far north in Norway, this is pure nature, thus it can be controlled, and not seeing actually that it's a cultural landscape of Sami pastoralists. Is it okay? I will continue. Is that fine? Good. Okay. So the last point here is what we also see. Mega infrastructure projects are great docking stations, as I have said, with relation to this aspect of this enchantment as well. They must not necessarily be set up, but the idea that something big is coming, where another mine can be related if there's a road, for instance, or an oil field can be explored, you know, or a conservation area could be set up, you know. All these things dock into that development and adds more projects and adds more changes and adds more powerful actors to this. So I would like to take you very quickly through 4 case studies. I won't go through all the 16, the time is not there, but just let me spend the time to talk about 4 of them, and please ask questions if you have so. One example is an example from this Belt and Road Initiative, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPCE, in Balochistan or Balochistan. There are several writings. A flagship Chinese vision where a huge port has been built. You see the picture here, to develop $62 billion sort of project coming from the government with the enchantment discourse. People of Balochistan, who is a remote area, they will get money, they will get actually development, they will get jobs. So an international anti-politics machine of really saying, well, now the new world is coming for you. A disenchantment very easily, because there are several tribal groups here. There are fishermen, there are pastoralists who actually feel left out by the project because they were not involved, and they realize they lose a lot. Specifically, the fishery people lost a lot here, and also the pastoral commons, and had very little bargaining power to have a say in the whole process. There were some naturalist feelings that were trickled, which were not foreseen, that actually a nationalist group was saying, well, this is again the global north and China who's investing here, and we want to have a free Balochistan movement, also military movement, the Liberation Army. And this again was then leading to more control by the central government. You see the infrastructure coming in, the area gets important, money comes in. Liberation groups arm and say, we target this. It's not the local people, it's other people, you know, and then the whole thing sort of gets more and more controlled. There's less room then for local people to do something then about it, because they could be related to the Liberation Army. So fear also of these docking stations, some other projects can come in, some other investors, because the basic infrastructure is then there. And also the context of terrorism, so the potential of a nationalist escalation, which also actually puts down local ways of trying to say, hey, we're not okay with this, we don't profit, and our common pool resources are taken away. So this is one case where also very limited reaction is possible from the local context, because it's not just that people are facing this, they're also reacting. A second case example comes from Africa, from the Lapset corridor. This is a corridor, a mega infrastructure project that relates Kenya then with Ethiopia, Southern Sudan, etc. It's a huge port where there were local fishery people who lost their access to fishing, and there were also protests. Here you see this picture here that people were protesting because their resource has been then taken away. It is sold by Kenya as being in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically SDG 9 on sustainable infrastructure. Has been one of the arguments also to say this is a good thing, we need money for this, although the promise of jobs and development was not actually held up. A lot of people were losing their fishery grounds even 10 years later after the port was start to be built, and people have a lot of disenchantment because they realize it's not for us, hence also these sort of mobilization there. Fishing grounds, and this is the very nice work of, in this case study, of a master student, Florina Wertmüller, who stayed here for a couple of months, worked together, lived together with fishing people, and realized how the whole fishing season is massively reduced. Also access to fish is reduced due to the destruction of mangroves. And also there's no compensation that sort of takes place there. It's also less attractive for tourists. So that little money which came from small-scale tourism, because, you know, going a bit out with small boats, snorkeling, etc., was of course also destroyed there. So also cash-wise, it was very, very difficult there, and no compensation have been paid so far. So also a case that really nicely shows how actually people are very easily disenchanted, and really it takes away their livelihoods. There are protests and lawsuit cases, so a bit more of local reactions. Not that in the Balochistan case people would not react, but they had a bit more institutional aspects to do this. And here comes in an element which I have not highlighted that much, that element of institution shopping. So the selections of rules and regulations which are there from both sides, from the sides of people who want to install this, but also from local people trying to use these rules and regulations there. The third case is this quite famous Dakota Access Pipeline in Northern America. I think you all might heard of this. Creating a huge protest actually from tribal people because they were saying this is sacred land. They have this other ontology and try to use that ontological power to say this is sacred land. It's a religious aspect, and we have to sort of see that the whole thing is not taking place. Perhaps very quickly, if we go back, also here people had very much relation to the fisheries, etc. So also another ontology as the developers had. So protests since the onset here with strong external support. Perhaps you have heard this in the news. A lot of people, environmentalists, activists were coming, supporting, trying to show support to the campaign of Standing Rock. Then politics from the States. Obama blocked it before he had to hand it over to Trump. Trump deblocked it immediately, then actually again by Biden deblocked, etc. So also all these are in so-called democracies. All these projects are also part of political aspects of different parties' interests. The German was to live in energy and to be more independent with this pipeline by the high local disenchantment, and also environmental considerations by the tribal council there. But it also goes beyond. It's not just health and water pollution. It's really this ontology of non-naturalist ontology saying we stand on sacred ground. It's important for us. It's something which you Westerners might not understand, but it's an important thing. So trying to also use this in the arguments, also regarding rules that religious aspects legally should be protected. and resist collaboration for environmental assessments because saying, well, we can have assessments from all over the place saying it's okay and it's safe and the tubes here will be super safe, etc. But we don't trust this, we don't believe this, and in addition, this does not change our ontological view of the area. That's a case where we see a lot of resistance or more resistance. I will come now to the last case in Norway, which I would like to present, the Fosen Wind Park. This is Norway's green energy to push for wind energy expansion, the largest windmill project in Europe. 6 wind parks, 277 turbines. Must imagine, I mean, you have turbines a bit all over the place, and imagine about, I don't know, 50 or hundreds more, standing in one line. So really, really massive. And also in an area which is not highly inhabited, where you have reindeer herding. This is the paper of Bettina Wieler, which I also, if you would like to select something, it's a very nice paper, I think. Indigenous reindeer herders who were not asked, but had their communal pastures grabbed in this remote area. And of course you can say, well, I mean, this is just one portion. They move all over the place. But the thing is, with pastoralism, for those who know, mobility is very important. You cannot uphold transhumance if you're not able to also use several spots which are designed. So here, this northern part, if you take this away, the whole mobility and pastoral transhumance is not possible. So if this is gone, it's very difficult. Well, you can say, okay, these reindeers, I mean, also other cattle, sometimes they stay under, no problem, the windmills turn. Bettina Wieler showed in her work very nicely, and also through participant observation, because she was helping to herd these animals. And they got crazy when they came next to this. So it's absolutely, completely impossible actually to herd it. It's very difficult. But that was not taken in account when the people were sort of saying, hey, you're violating our rights, So that local knowledge is often not showed. And there's another anecdote which I want to say. When the things, when the area is getting cold, you have rains, and then you have ice which sort of collects here to the rotators. I mean, I never thought about this. There are many other things which I didn't thought about this, and the students showed me. But here, these are like ice missiles, because sometimes they hold and then and they fly all over the place. I never thought about this. Sometimes also these unexpected things which are happening, quite interesting. And the problem is really disturbing these herds, which I said. And but the green enchantment from the government, hey, Norway needs to go away from fossil. This is a great thing. And so little people are living there. Come on, it's like this argument also in Latin America: too much land for too few people. Whereas not recognizing that this is a landscape which is really important. And is it really necessary to destroy this? Couldn't perhaps be a discussion. If windmills, then where should they be, etc. And also participation lie, also strong word, but Bettina Wieler can really show that, as many others can, that actually the involvement of Sami people was very, very low, by saying, okay, we listen to you, but it's going in here and out here again, which we also know from discussions with oil and mining. It's the same type of procedure. And that's the danger, which we see in all these 3 books. This whole thing comes with the same mindset. Okay, we sit down, we discuss, but it's not paid attention to what local people are losing and what they feel. Also, I mean, there are no jobs. All people who are working here, there are no jobs for Sami people. The only thing which they have is the reindeer herding. Also, perhaps in Norway, there's still, in all areas in the north, still a bit this sort of bit of racism which is still there. So for Sami people, it's still very difficult to get other things. And here, suddenly, when these talks were going on, they were saying they were putting 10 windmills in this area. Suddenly there were 80. And it's like we say in French, a fait accompli. It's like we built it. You want us to take them down? Huh? There was a court case actually to stop it, which was a sort of victory for local people, but these windmills were not taken down. So local people were very much disenchanted, because not respecting indigenous status and acting against the will of indigenous people led to this sort of disenchantment in this context. And while court cases and protests are successful, these windmills are still standing there. So I come to the conclusion now. This is just the table, all these cases 5 cases in Asia, also Tibet, perhaps this is of interest for Ian, but also India, 2, Mongolia, African cases 5, in the Americas, Ecuador, Bolivia, and the US. And in Europe, we'll talk quickly then about one other case. In Switzerland, we had 3 cases. What can we say when we compare this? Analysis of state and company strategies. In all cases, this development enchantment was used. In 7 of these, it was combined with green development and mobilizing structural power, money, with the discursive power, green turn, naturalist ontological power. These are all areas which are pure nature. They can be used, so it's not a problem. 4 forms of anti-politics machines were used, ranging from, well, smokescreen for state repression, smokescreen for land grabbing, combined with green grabbing, the 3rd point, and saying, well, we need to development. Sorry, if some people are losing, we need to do that. In 14 cases, land and land-related common pool resources was actually grabbed. So the commons grabbing here is very nicely to be shown as a strategy from the top. And more democratic countries offer more option to legally challenge governments and companies compared to countries with autocratic political systems. So more bargaining power, but as I said, often fait accompli context. Now local reactions from anti-politics to politics machines. We could argue in 12 of the 16 cases there's an immediate enchantment because the costs of the loss of the commons were not met. In 4 cases the MIP is not implemented, but there's a fear of commons grabbing already taking place. In 5 cases, specifically also in India, Mumbai, Delhi corridor, for instance, people say, we're going to get some money, it might be okay, it might be good, but when the whole thing turned up, they realized they lost everything. It was issue of land and water rights specifically, which was at stake there. So leading very immediately to a disenchantment. Now, this interesting thing, institution shopping from below. In 9 of the 16 cases, local actors were tried to use the institutional diversity. Legal cases regarding indigenous rights or property rights or environmental rights to address the enchanted modernity with institutional means, also with court cases. So there's a whole range actually to be used. And often other identities and ontologies were very important in that struggle, not just in the global south, but also, as I will show, in Switzerland and in Italy, this relation to the environment was very important. So this last point, local reactions from anti-politics machine to politics machine here, we have actually 3 levels. We have what we call weapons of the weak. We don't see that many things, but that doesn't mean that people don't react, but it's very difficult to show actually a resistance. Up to 3 cases were a bit higher bargaining power, some protests and discussions, but not real politics machines, which would they'd be the rest trying to halt or to stop the MIP. Using formal legal strategies, using different ontologies or own ontologies to say this is a cultural landscape and our cultural survival is at danger. So it's a drama of the grabbed commons. You don't know how it goes out, and I think that's very important. Local people are reacting. So it's very important to analyze this and to see where power elements are. I would like to finish with a discussion what leads this to further studies and policy actions. It's not an argument against infrastructure and development, but the question who drives it, who can use it, who pays the costs, and issues how do structural, discursive, and ontological power processes have an impact in this action arena sphere, and participatory process is needed, and recognition of local cultural landscapes and common property, if not a huge harm, should be seen as an impact. So it's about harnessing local ideas and fair play regarding MIPs. The question which we often heard throughout the studies, for instance, also in Kenya with the Lapsset corridor, where environmental NGOs could discuss with the government where, the railroad and the highway should go through. With them it was discussed, but not with local people, because they had the power to say, here it's not so good because there's a protected area with zebras and rhinos there, and perhaps move there, where there's pastoral grounds, because they have less bargaining power. The sentence is, or the phrasing is, that picks it nicely. Why is it that conservationists can discuss with project managers, and it's legitimate, so conservation is legitimate, pastoralism is not legitimate, and local groups are excluded and sidelined and forced to drive expensive law cases. Because that's also the thing, in Kenya, if you want to do a law case, you need a bit structural power. You need the cash to do it. And not just on the table, but also under the table, so to speak. I would like to finish with a case in Switzerland that shows another dimension with which I want to terminate. You won't be able to read this all, but it's a very interesting case. It's also in an urban context where in the city of Biel, this is in the canton of Bern, which is the capital sort of district, it's a second big city, a big connection to the major highway should be built and go through part of the city which was very loved by local people, very different groups living there. So they started actually a campaign. All these people got together, very interestingly, because they don't have, apart from staying there and liking this urban landscape, they didn't have a collectivity, but this created a collectivity, and they started the movement West-Ost, that is the name of this connection. It's the East-Est, I don't know how to translate it. So not like this. There was a whole movement. We don't want this, but it's not, we don't want, it's clear there should be a connection between the highway and the city, but there could be other ways of doing it, not just to destroy a lot of houses, green parks, trees, etc., but do something else. And that's very interesting. And they were so powerful, they got together, they had legal elements which they selected, they had engineers among them, they had local people among them who were really active and created that movement, were actually discussing also how could this infrastructure be set up. The idea is, okay, infrastructure is needed, but not like that. That's the title of this movement. Organizing platform for discussions, including wiser view ideas of infrastructure, think below the mega-sized term. And that's very important, people also in the countryside, they're not against roads, but discussing what's the quality of the road, where does it go to, where should it be, how can we profit from it. That's the basic thing. And the interesting thing about this case is really challenging the mega idea, and they were successful. So this highway connection was not built. They were successful actually kicking this aside. And they were successful because they really had a good organized movement which was well embedded in the local community. They could use on all the levels of all the institution shopping levels, they could use actually their power. And it's also a learning process when dominant power relations can be changed in a geostrategic world. So the question here really is, and that might sound a bit naive, but it would be interesting to see when discussing with local communities what are their ideas for infrastructure, what do they want, and actually trying to see where are the institutions that can be used. Of course, in a Chinese context, this is very, very difficult, for instance, or in autocratic context. But in others, it might be a good way. It's also about to learn. Of course, Switzerland is a really sort of, or labeled as being a very, how shall I put it, a very democratic state, but also just to tell you now, there's a big discussion. There's an energy law which has been voted for now, but it entails also the rule that local people should not have a say when large windmill turbines, when huge sort of solar panel projects in the mountains, because the idea is in winter, the sun up there, so we harness this energy there, and also the enlargement of large dams in Switzerland. So local people, by law, are now not having the same power as they had before. But already now there are counter sort of referendums and initiatives, so that's not the dead end of it. And of course, that's an interesting ground to see what's happening in a democratic state. But of course, we have to see how can it be taken further regarding environment justice and bottom-up institution building, which we call constitutionality. We have several cases to show how this works in other areas. It's interesting to see, is this possible and how is it possible? With this, I finish my presentation. I hope I was not too long. There are two more slides, or three more slides, but I leave this. This is just showing you how the whole topics relate to that model, but you can watch this afterwards if you like, and it's also here in the book. So sorry for being a bit long, but thank you very much for your attention.